Hello and welcome to this demonstration of Xignal S1000D. Xignal is a software as a service application for S1000D, incorporating a CSDB, integrated editor and publisher. So being a software as a service application means that it can be accessed in any browser, on any device, using a unique URL to you. So we'll be logging in today as this generic My Company, but every company, or every tenancy as they're called in the SaaS world, has their own unique URL to log into. And with that, it means you can also brand the login screen and within the application with your own logo as well. Okay, so let's log in. So I'll just log in as myself today, and I am a super user of this environment. So we've got two-factor authentication enabled. There's a couple of methods we can use by which to receive the two-factor authentication code. I'll use my phone. So I'm just waiting for a code to come through on my phone. There it is. Okay, so the dashboard. So the first thing that we see when logging in is this pretty dashboard interface. So the dashboard gives us some nice useful statistics around both projects and around the users that are assigned to specific projects. So here on the left hand side, for example, we've got some nice little donut charts of this specific project here, for example, and this one here is specific to this project. So we can see by just mousing over the parts of the donut there, it tells us how many DMs are checked in, checked out, and at various states of workflow. Over on the right hand side here, these are the users which are assigned to the currently selected project, which is this one here. Okay, so again, this is telling us what status specific data modules are at according to the users that have been assigned to that project. So if I scroll down, we get the same kind of data, just displayed in a different format here, and again at the bottom as well. So this one's quite useful. Just for a quick overview, we can see that, Jake, this is me. I've got quite a lot of work here assigned to me, so there's a couple checked in there. I've got 10 checked out, and there's 4 assigned. So this dashboard interface is completely configurable per user. So if you were to log in as any user, you can click this edit mode here. This enables you to remove or add widgets, move them around, resize them. You can do all sorts of things in here. You can add additional tabs for specific widgets. So it's all completely customizable. Okay, worth noting that depending on the role and permission that you've been assigned, and we will touch more on roles and permissions shortly, not everybody necessarily will have access to the dashboard. So again, I'll talk a bit more about roles and permissions and what you need to do to assign certain accesses in just a second. So let's turn that off. Okay, so the user interface. Let's have a little look around to get familiar with the user interface. So up here on the right hand side at the top, if I click on my name, this gives us access to some menus where we can do some fairly typical things like change profile pictures. I can go into my settings here and change my name and email address. I can verify my phone number here, and by verifying my phone number, that gives me access. That gives me the ability to be able to use my phone for two-factor authentication when we logged in, which you saw me do. Okay, it's got this two-factor login tab here. This one here is specific to the Google Authenticator app. So if you were to download Google Authenticator, scan this QR code with the app, and that would enable you to use Google Authenticator as your two-factor authentication. Okay. So just coming across to the left a little bit, you can see we can change the language of the user interface, and this one here, this tells us the currently selected project within our environment. If I were to click on that, it would take us to the projects page, but we'll have a look at the projects page in just a minute. So coming down the left, you can see we've got the support button at the bottom here. We can log support tickets in My Supports. Documentation takes us to the online documentation pages, where we've got some fairly extensive docs. Okay. Just coming up, we've got the administrator menu item. Now, as I said at the start, I am logging in as the super user, so with that becomes all of the administration options. Depending on the role and permission that you've been given, and again we'll touch on those in a second, will dictate exactly what you see down the left hand side here. So currently I've got access to everything, but if you log in as an external user or as an author, again depending on the configuration of the system and how your super user has configured it, you may not have access to all of these menus. Okay, system settings. So down here in system settings, these are a kind of environment level settings. So for example, if I come down to visual settings, if I come down to settings here, we can see that the logo has been uploaded and added in here. This logo is what dictates what we see up in the left hand side here on the top, and also on the login screen that I mentioned earlier. So if we change this, it would change this logo and on our login screen. Okay, I won't get into the details of these, it's fairly boring stuff. Okay, so the S1000D configurations. So these are system level kind of repositories for certain pieces of information that we need for S1000D data modules. So for example, if I click on country codes, you can see that we've got a bunch of country codes in here. So S1000D data modules require country codes, language codes, RPC cage codes, which are responsible partner company cage codes, and originator cage codes. So all of these pages here are literally just repositories for those codes. To add a new one, we would just go up to the right hand side here. Worth mentioning, whenever we create anything new, whether it be a new RPC in this case, a new data module, a new publication module, it's always a button up on the right hand side here. So the whole environment, the whole interface has been designed to be intuitive and to remove some of the complexities of a lot of S1000D tools. So if we wanted to add, for example, a new RPC cage code, we would just add the code in there and add the enterprise name in there and click save. Okay, we'll skip over some of this. Let's go down to info codes. So here we have our list of info codes. Again, the info codes are associated with the info name, and this tells us what type of information is held within a data module. Okay, so there are literally hundreds of these codes. Okay, and if we wanted to change change the title, we can do that in here just by edit and change title. Or if we wanted to add some new project specific ones, again we come up to the top right, create new info code, add the code and the title, and it will be added. Okay, so let's look at users. So the users page here is again just a repository for all of the users. We are not deciding what roles we're allocating to the users at this point, because that's done at a project level. So all this is a list of our users within the system. Okay, if we want to create a new user, we come up to create new user. We add some credentials in here. If we've got the tick box tick there for send activation email, when we click save, it will send the credentials to that user and they'll be able to log in. Okay, now the only thing that we can do here in terms of, or even related to roles and permissions, is we can say whether the user is a standard user or a super user. But this isn't to be confused with roles, which, as I said, is roles are assigned at a project level. So for the most part, we'll keep standard user ticked here when creating users. Okay, let's come up to roles. So roles. Now, roles within the Xignal system are what make this system unique and powerful. Roles are essentially just names for groups of permissions. And what I mean by that is we've got an author here, for example. So if I have a look at what permissions an author has, If we click on the permissions tab here and we scroll down through, you can see that within data module workflow, we've assigned the author the ability to check in, to check out, to edit DMs, send for review. We've given them the dashboard, so any author that logs in can see a dashboard, and a couple of other permissions, but for the most part they don't have the ability to do all that much, just enough to be able to do their job and write their data modules. We may well want to create some custom roles. We may have a lead author role that we want to allow some additional permissions to, for example. So we could click on create new role, we'd type in lead author, we would go to permissions and start ticking some extra boxes. And these boxes represent different menus and functions and screens within the system. So literally by ticking boxes you're enabling certain functions or menus. Okay, so that's quite powerful. You can see here we've also got this customer role, and it's been assigned this external label. So what that's saying there, if we just read the mouse over, any user assigned the external role will only have visibility of their assigned data. So what that means is, if I were to log in if I were to set up a user and assign them a customer role, when they log in, the system will know they're an external user and they won't have visibility of the vast majority of the system. All they will have visibility of is data modules that have been assigned to them. Okay, and that will make a bit more sense in a minute when we look at the data module manager. And we can even log in as a user that's been assigned the customer role, which will make things a bit clearer. Okay, so let's come up to projects and go to project list. So this is our project page, so it does what it says on the tin. This is literally just a list of our projects, and you can see by the yellow highlighted project here that we've got S1000D bike V8 selected, which is confirmed up here. To create a new project, again we just come up to the right hand side here, create new project. We would type in some details, the specification, so we would choose which version of S1000D we want using pickers, security classifications, language code, country code, again using pickers. So this is just looking at those repositories that we looked at earlier and allowing us to select rather than hand typing. So again, originator and partner, so originator cage code, RPC cage code, Brex, and the slightly more interesting one here is the workflow tab. So the system has the ability for us to set up custom workflows. So what we mean by that is that as standard or by default, the author would write the data module, they would send it for review, the reviewer or anyone with the reviewer role would pick up that data module, review it. Once they're satisfied and have approved it, the data module would be issued. But in a lot of instances that may not be quite a robust enough workflow process or review process. We may, for example, wish to have a safety review or an engineering review or a quality review or even an external customer review. Okay, so to set up a project with a more strict and robust workflow process, and maybe a 3 or 4 step, we can tick this box here. What that does for us is this reveals all of the roles that we saw earlier under the roles menu, and we can tick whichever roles we need to review the data module before the module will be approved. So for example, I may still click review. This is our internal reviewer. We still want an internal reviewer, and then I may click customer. I'm going to order these in the order I want that review to happen. So now what we would have is we have the author writing the module. They would send it for review. It would go to our user who has been assigned a reviewer role, and then it would go to our external customer. And if you remember what we said about the external customer, the way we've assigned the permissions means that when our customer logs in, they will only be able to see the modules that are assigned to them. Okay. So setting up projects anyway is really straightforward. Just a few boxes and you're away. Okay, so let's look at project users. So here is our project users page, and the users that you see here in front of you are all users that have been allocated the S1000D Bike V8 project. So we've added users to the project, but we need to know what roles they've been allocated. Or we need to allocate roles to the users. So most of these have been assigned roles already, and I can check. I can go on edit roles, and I can see that Amanda, for example, is an author. And if I come down to me, Jake Memory, I can see that I'm an author and reviewer. If we click on Jim Blogs, he's a reviewer. So let's say, for example, we wanted to add the author role to Jim. We can click on the button over there on the right, and we can say, okay, Jim is an author, and that will add the author tag to him. So that means we can now assign data modules to Jim, which we wouldn't have been able to do prior to adding the author role to him. Okay, so let's look at the data modules. So if we click on data modules, data module manager, you can see here that we have this nice grid interface in front of us. So what are we looking at here? Well, these are all the data modules within our project, the Bike V8 project. Now there could be potentially 1,000, 2,000, maybe more data modules listed within this project. So we need a way for the user to be able to filter those records, those modules effectively. So there's numerous ways in here by which we can filter this data. Okay, first of all, we have the status filter up here. So I can filter on any status I like, and the status, of course, represents these statuses are associated with this column here. So if I click on checked out, it will filter on any data modules that are checked out, assigned, okay, or any other status, or we can reset the filter. I can also click on this button here, this switch assigned to me. If I click on that, it will filter for any data modules which have my name either in the author or reviewer column. So as you can see, that's it. That's the extent now, filter DM16. Okay, let's turn that off. We can also use some slightly more advanced filtering. We can use this free field text box here. So if I wrote some text in there, it would filter on any of these columns within the grid. I can also use the specific grid filters in here, which we've got some of these kind of slightly more advanced filters on. And I can also use these kind of Excel filters as well. We can rearrange these columns should we so desire, and we've got the SNS pane over here, which we also use for filtering. So I can filter on, let's say, what's a good example? Tyres. So that will just give me my tyres. Okay, so let's have a look at a data module and see what else we can do here. As I scroll through, I can see several icons here. So what do these mean? So the 8 here represents 8 graphics within the data module. The little speech mark there means that there is a comment against this data module, and the paperclip means there's an attachment. So how do we see these graphics, comments and attachments? Well, what we can do, we can drill into the record here. Okay, so the details tab here just shows us some basic data about the data module. We can click on where used here, and if there were any modules that actually referenced this module, they would be listed in here. We can click on graphics, and this will list our 8 graphics that we see there, 8, so there's our 8 graphics, and we can expand these. We can click on the history, and this will give us a history of everything that has happened to that data module. And we can click on comments. So we can see I've made a comment here, may need further input from engineering or an SME. And we can click on attachments here. And here you can see I've added a source document from engineering on the repair procedure. And we could download that just by clicking on the symbol there, the button there. So to add comments and attachments, it's a right-click menu item. So if I right-click on the record there, I'd come down to add, and we can see there's an attachments and comments menu item there. So if I click on attachments, we can actually give this attachment a category, engineering drawing or tech spec, etc., etc. And we would attach the file, and we can assign it a description. And when we save, that will upload against the record. Similarly with comments, we can just go add comments, and we can write a comment. Okay. So let's have a slightly closer look at the right-click menu. So again, the right click menu, what you see here or what the user sees here will be entirely dependent on the role and the permissions for that role that you've been allocated as the user. So you can see under administration we've got a few things here that are grayed out. That's because obviously the data module is currently checked out and in work. If we go to assign, you can see we can assign author and reviewer here. So by clicking on assign author, these are a list of all the users that have been assigned the author role. And if I click on assign reviewer, similarly there's slightly fewer names there because we had fewer users assigned the reviewer role. If I find a suitable module a minute, let's go to this one. So the author menu item you can see in here, because the data module is already checked out, we don't have the ability to check that out. We can check it in. We've got an undo checkout as well, so that would essentially undo any work that we've done since the last checkout. And we can send for review once it's checked in, of course, and once we're happy. So we'll edit the DM in just a second. Okay, now the reviewer, as you can see, these are grayed out currently because the data module is checked out. It's not ready for review yet. We can view the PDF view from here. We can view it in the XML editor, or we can just view the plain XML from here. Okay, this is all read-only, of course. We've seen the add menu. We've got the flags here as well, so we could stick a red flag on this for whatever reason. Then you may just want to highlight it to come back to later. It's much like flagging items in Outlook or something similar. It's really down to you what you use the colours for. It's just a way in which to highlight that row that's meaningful to you. And we can actually filter on flags as well, should you want to. Okay, let's remove the flag. Okay, and we can also export down here as well, so we can export a single module, and that would export it with its any graphics that are referenced within it. Okay, so let's have a look at the editor. So this is the Xignal S1000D integrated S1000D editor, and if you've ever worked with S1000D editors before, the first thing you're likely to notice is not only how pretty it looks, but the fact that there is no visible XML. I can assure you we are working with the S1000D schema, and there is XML in the background, and we can prove that because we can just open out this XML drawer here, and as we click around the document it updates where we are, and this lists all of the elements and attributes within the document, the underlying document. So this is useful just to see kind of whereabouts our cursors sat, and what we're doing when we're typing. Okay, but for the most part you don't really need this. We can just minimize that. Okay, now this editor has been designed to be as intuitive as a word processor like Word, for example. So even if you are completely new to S1000D, with minimal training you should be able to get up and running with writing data modules in no time, because you don't, for the most part, have to worry about any of the XML underneath. All of the toolbar buttons up here, unlike a lot of generic XML editors like Oxygen or Arbortext or any of the other generic ones, every button in here has a function within our S1000D environment, as opposed to the generic ones which have a bunch of buttons that you're never going to use because they're just generic XML tools. So most of these you will be able to work out without me explaining, but there's a couple there that I can just explain. So let's say, for example, we wanted to add a new graphic in here. So we've got one. Let's add, in fact, you know what, I'll add a graphic down the bottom. So let's come down here. This is an empty procedural step. What I'll do and add a graphic down here. So I would click on this graphic button here. I would pick on any graphic that I wanted in my module. This is giving me a list of graphics from the CSDB and a preview. I can insert image, and that is adding my graphic for me. Okay, all we need to do is give it a title. All we then need to do is assign it an ID. So if I click on the graphic and I go to the attributes panel, click on figure, we can see that it's assigned this kind of nasty, not particularly user-friendly ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give that a fig 4, for example, something a bit more readable. And now we can actually reference that graphic. So if I were to say refer to, and I wanted to refer to this graphic now, I can click on this link button here, and what that does, it gives me a list of all of my internal references, including my latest figure 4 that I've added there. So if I change target type to figure, that will just filter on the figures. And I can click on fig 0004, it highlights in the background what I'm about to do, what I'm about to reference, and I can click add. Okay, and there's reference to my figure 4. If I wanted to change the reference, I can double click it. Okay, and if I wanted to change the graphic, I can double click the graphic and change that as well. And it's the same for any referencing. If we wanted to reference some support equipment or a spare or supply, whatever, it's the same. Tables can be copied and inserted directly from Word. So S1000D uses a special kind of table format called the CALS table format, and Xignal does the conversion for you. So all you need to do is copy a table from Word, Control V, and it pastes it in. So that's pretty nifty. Any warnings and cautions that we wanted to add, we can do that. So if I wanted to add a warning to this step, I can just click here, click add warning. Because warnings have to go above the step, it automatically puts that above the step for me. My new warning. Okay, and then I can click the save button. See down in the right, this is saving. Now there's also these this bar down the bottom here that if we mouse over these element names, it shows us what it is or whereabouts in the document that these elements are sat. So for example, if I hang over para, it shows me that this is the para that we're manipulating, if you like. And if I click that, we can insert an element within that para. We can cut and copy or delete that para. Okay. So there's various ways that we can actually change the elements and attributes within here. This is the way that I find the easiest, but we also have the element bar here as well. So as we click around, it does the same thing. It's highlighting where we are and telling us what we can insert before, insert into, or insert after. But as I say, I prefer to use this down here personally. Okay, similarly attributes, as we're clicking around, I think I showed you some of the attributes here. So with a figure, we've got the figure ref there. If I click on that internal ref, it's giving us the internal ref ID. It's telling us that we're linking to a supply and giving us the href as well in there. Adding items of support equipment are really easy. So if we come up to support equipment here, if I click in here, we get these little icons, much like you do in Word now, and I can click this little plus to add a new element of support, item of support equipment. I can give it a name, manufacturer part number, a cage code and a manufacturer part number, and that's it. If we want to change the quantity, I can click over here and we can change the unit of measurement. Quite often we have EA for each. Okay, and it's as simple as that. I'm just going to undo those changes. Okay, so let's assume that as the author we are happy with our work and we want to save and send this module for review now. Okay, so we can close down the editor and I can now right click and I can check it in. Okay, you can see the status has changed to checked in. You can also see my name here is in the reviewer column. I've assigned myself as the reviewer just for the purposes of demonstration. It makes life a bit easier if it's just me doing the authoring and reviewing. Okay, so as author I now want to send it for review. And I would have now been emailed saying that there's a data module waiting for me to review. And you can see in the workflow column here as well, we've got a tick, it's been authored, and it's moved on to the review stage. Okay, so as the reviewer, I've now got these menu items available to me, and I can review the DM. So, excuse me. So what's happening here is the integrated editing environment is now opening in exactly the same way, only this time, because it knows that we are a reviewer, you'll notice that almost everything is grayed out to me now. So no matter where I click, virtually everything is grayed out. The only thing that's available to me is this comment button. Okay, so as the reviewer, I need to go through and review this data module. So let's just come down to where I was playing around earlier. Where did I add that warning? Here. Okay, so let me, as the reviewer, I will highlight this warning, or the word warning. I will add a comment, and I'll add, please remove warning, because that warning is pretty useless to us. Okay, now let's come down here to the graphic that I added, and I might say, as you can see, my second comment, move step and graphic. Okay, fair enough, those were pretty useless, weren't they? So let's assume now that as the reviewer, I've been through, I've checked the data module, I've made comment, I can't make any changes as we've established, so I'll now save and come back out. Okay, let's close that. So as the reviewer, we obviously want to reject that module, so I'll come down to the reviewer menu item and I will reject. And I'll say something like, please see comments in DM, and I'll save that. And now as the author, I'm now receiving another email telling me that a data module that I've previously worked has been rejected and it's waiting for rework. So as the author, I can come back in now, I can check out the module, I can edit the DM, okay, so the first thing I want to do is go to my first comment. So if I click the little next button there, that will take me down to the comment, and if I click on comments, it tells me please remove warning. So to do that, I'll just use this bar down the bottom like we have previously. If I hang my mouse over the warning, we can see that highlights the whole warning. I can just click delete and that removes that warning. I now want to go to the next comment. Okay, please remove step and graphic. So to do that, I can come down here to procedural step, para. I can delete that para. I can then click on figure, it's highlighting that figure, and we can delete that figure also. It looks like there's an extra para there that we don't need, so we can get rid of that too. Okay, so as the author, I think we're satisfied that this now meets the requirements of the reviewer. And we can come back out of here. And we can now push this on, we can check it in. And we would go through that same process again. So in the author menu, we would send it for review, the reviewer would pick it up, they would make sure they were satisfied, and hopefully this time they would approve that data module. And because this data module or this project, we've only got this two-step process, the workflow process set up, in other words, author and reviewer, as soon as the reviewer has reviewed the module and approved it, that data module would go to issued. Had we have had more steps set up that we looked at earlier in the custom workflow, for example the external customer, there would be an extra bubble here, and only when it had gone to the external reviewer and they had reviewed it and they had approved it would it go to issued. So it depends how many steps you've got set up as to how long that workflow or you know how stringent that workflow process is. Okay, so let's look at some of the other functions down here. So we'll look at publishing in just a second, but we've also got import here, so let's have a quick look at import.
So to import, we just use a zip file containing the data modules and graphics. So let's choose some data to import. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import the data that's already there. So it will tell me that that the data modules already exist, but this is just for demonstration purposes, of course. So what that's done is it's uploaded. That's the first thing it does, and then when we click validate, it will run a series of validation checks and give us a report. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so this gives us a nice summary of our imports. So there's various checks that are happening here on each of our data modules that were contained within that zip file. So for example, it does a parsing check, checking against the S1000D schema. It does this prerequisite check. So what that's checking is things like security classification, language codes, cage codes, making sure that they're all they're already in the system. And if it flags a language code that it doesn't recognize because it's not in the system, it would flag that and tell you there. So again, it's just that extra layer of a protection, I suppose, to make sure that we don't end up with data sets full of nonsense. We do a Brex check as well, so this also supports layered Brex. If we've got one Brex referencing another Brex, for example, it does an entities check. So what this is doing, it's checking that any entities, any graphics that are referenced within a module are included within the zip file. It does a database check, checking that, well, we can see what it's checking here because it's failed. It's saying the data module code with this issue number already exists in the CFDB. So it's failing on that. Well, we knew that. And it does a data module reference check as well. So this is just checking that any referenced modules within each of the modules are also contained within that zip file. And again, we can see here that this data module is referencing all of these modules that aren't actually in that zip file. Okay. Now, we can scroll through these and look at them all, but they're all going to be roughly the same. So let's just come down a little bit. What this is saying is that 4 out of that 88 can be imported. So there were 4 modules there that actually did pass the validation check. Okay, so we could just click import and import those 4. Alternatively, we can choose to bypass any of those warnings. So it's telling us here that essentially we can import the DMs having the database conflicts. We've flicked that on, but it is giving us a warning that it will overwrite any DMs in the system, and as a result, that would actually import 88 of 88 DMs. Okay, but we're just going to cancel this. Cancel the import. Okay, validation. So what the validation does, if we just click on validate DM references, this is just a nice way for us to have some confidence that any references within our data set resolve. We've got the reference data exists. So what this is telling us is 106 data modules were analysed, and it's actually found 12 broken links within here. So it's saying within this data module, it actually references this module, but it couldn't find it in the data set. Okay, so this is just a nice way to give us a bit of confidence, or at least give us some sort of report which we can export to enable us to go in and fix any validation, any broken DM references. We've also got the search function here. So I could type anything in here, like pedal, for example, and if we click on search, this will search the entire data set incredibly quickly and give us the results, any data modules that contain the word pedal, and it shows us where they are, and it gives us this in italics here, which is quite nice. Okay, so again, that's a really nice feature. And we've got the export function as you'd expect. So coming down to graphic entities, so let's click on manage graphics. So this here is a repository of all of the graphics within our project, and I can click on the graphics, I can double click it, I can expand the graphic here, and we can see that it gives us a where used as well. So it tells us which data modules are actually calling up this graphic. And if I wanted to import
graphics into the system, or sorry, if I wanted to create new ICNs and attach an illustration to that graphic, I can click up here, create new entity. I can fill in some details. I can select how many ICNs I need, generate the ICNs, and what that's effectively doing is assigning the next number in sequence for me. In fact, let's just demonstrate that. So if I click that, if I click I want 2 new illustrations. What that's done is it's assigned the next 2 numbers in sequence, 538, 539. I can add a title to those graphics, and I can even upload the graphic files here as well. And I can upload the graphics with any name, and they will be renamed with the appropriate graphic board number. So just before I end the demo, one thing that I said I was going to show was logging in as the external customer user. So first of all, what we'll do, we'll just go to project list and we'll just select the custom workflow project. Okay, so let's have a look at project users. So similarly to before, if we click on Amanda Memory, for example, we can see that she's an author and reviewer in this project. But if we come down to Joe Blogs, what we can see is that they have been assigned the customer role. Now, as we established earlier, the customer role doesn't have many permissions at all associated with it. In fact, let's just have a look. We'll double check. If we go to roles, and if we have a look and see what the customer role has been assigned, in terms of permissions, you can see they've got absolutely nothing other than the ability to approve or reject. So they haven't got the dashboard ticked, for example. So what does that do? Well, let's have a look. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open, if we log out, that's what I'll do in fact, I'll log out and then we'll log in as Joe Blogs. Okay, so again, we're logging in as the external user Joe Blogs this time, so we've got 2-factor authentication enabled still. Now, the first thing you'll notice when we log in now is that because we didn't assign Joe Blogs the dashboard permission, he doesn't have a dashboard, he just gets this kind of notifications panel. Now, if we just reset these notifications to a little bit earlier so we can see, okay, let's do that and refresh. We can see that some data was assigned to him 24 days ago. We assigned this data module for him to review. Okay, so again, over on the left hand side here, vastly reduced menu items. They get the support, they get the project list, but they've only got one project in here. They obviously don't have project users, we don't want them messing around with that. And within the data modules menu, they only get one sub-menu here, which is data module manager. So if I click on data module manager, as opposed to my external user getting a whole list of project data modules, they only get the ones that have got their name in either reviewer or, well, in fact it would only ever be reviewer. So they've only got, they only get visibility of data modules which have got their name Joe in the reviewer column. Okay, so so we're really restricting the visibility of the external user here. So as we're creating modules, they would be notified, they log in their notifications panel, it would tell them there's a module waiting for them. The status would also be awaiting review, so they know which one they're going to, but they're only ever seeing modules which they've been assigned. Okay, so that's about it. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. If there are any questions, please feel free to give me a shout at jmemory@gpsl.co. Thank you very much.